It says, immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. During the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and they cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." You know, anything that you do for a while, it's just easy to kind of feel stuck and bored and same old, right? Whether it's your job, it can even be your small group at church, your family group, it can be church itself. After you've been here a while, you feel stuck. You begin to wonder if you really want to be here. You know, the world isn't all that great out there, but you feel like you're on a boat and you're about to get claustrophobic. It's all coming in on you. Other people begin to get on your nerves a little bit.
Okay.
You can put your finger now if you'd like to. Preferably not your spouse. Okay? You begin to maybe even get a little envious or jealous every now and then. How come I have to sit in the bow and he gets to sit in the stern? And you know, it's easy to relate to these 12 guys on a boat that night. And so I've got a few quick points I want to throw at us. And the first one is, you need to see God. These 12 guys really, really, really needed to see Jesus. You need to see God. The dictionary defines theophany as a defining moment when God makes an appearance. We've heard the word maybe epiphany. There's this great thought that you have. Well, you know, a thought shows up. What theophany means is God shows up. And we're a little more familiar with that, say, in the Bible. Like in the Old Testament, the burning bush, God showed up. You know, the Old Testament, the Red Sea parts, not too many people are questioning. God showed up. But I think sometimes we believe like, oh, that was thousands of years ago, and that was then, and this is now, and you know, we don't have too many God appearances anymore, and we're going to hope to strike that from the record today. God didn't like get weak over the last couple thousand years since Jesus left. God has a desire to appear today in your life and in mine. And this brief lesson is stolen from Walter Evans, who came and spoke at our Elders and Wives retreat. Was that last weekend? I think it was. But anyway, he shared this quick story that initially in Manchester, England, he and his wife Kim planted a church. And that was exciting for them, but then after a period of time they came back over to the States. He'd been in Philadelphia for about 20 years, and so but the Manchester church had gone through some ups and downs, and they were at a point where they didn't even have any full-time staff. And so he just went to the Philadelphia church and said, "Listen, I think I need to move back there for 6 months just to help them, just to love them, just to, you know, try to encourage them. They don't have, you know, all that we have." And so he and his wife moved back to Manchester, England for 6 months. And they said the first thing they felt when they walked in the door is, these guys don't see God anymore. All they see is each other. All they are is annoyed with each other's issues and problems and stuff. And they've lost the vision of God. So they actually got their videographer, we'll call him Julius in this case. They got their videographer, and they just said, when you have a God appearance, when something happens where you stop and say, wow, that had to be God. That wasn't me. That wasn't my wisdom. I didn't do it. When something happened, go over and see Julius, and we just want you to video it. And they just began, before service started, they just began to play these videos of theophanies, of times that people felt like they saw God. And they began to play them over and over until they got to a point where they had to say, sorry, we can't show them in our services anymore because it would take up our whole service. Because what they found is that nobody had been looking for God, but when you start looking for God, He's actually around every corner. That amazing things could be happening all the time at our workplace, you know, at our schools, in our homes, if we just had our eyes open for God. He's actually everywhere. And so, we can tell stories of our kids or of our, of marriages or of, Will Walter walked in the door last night. We had a little 5-year anniversary for Jeremiah Cody and for his renewal. But Will walked in the door, and it was like, in a sense, it was like God appeared. Because 20 years ago, I met Will Walter on WPI's campus playing basketball. He was an atheist. We won't see all the stuff he did, but he had like no interest in God. And because we crossed paths on a gymnasium court one day, he's now like a deacon in our church. He's like way beyond me in terms of spirituality and heart for God. And it's just like, it's a God thing. I saw God, how He's just changed even just one person's life. And we all have those moments if, when we're on the basketball court, we stop and say, whoops, let's see if God could show up today.
Right.
If today, when you go into your restaurant, if you stop and think, how could God show up today? When you're interacting with your family, how could God show up today? Keep an eye open for God. This church, you and I, we need to see God.
Yeah.
But here's the other point that I get from this passage. If you want to see God, you have to take the first step. You need to take the first step. Please take the first step. I think what happens a lot of times is, of course, especially if you're sitting in a church building on Sunday morning, everybody says, of course I'd like to see God. Of course I'd like Him to show up and feed my 5,000, feed us for Thanksgiving, everybody wants to see God, but how many of us are really the Peters that are willing to take that first bold, radical faith step, which gets God's attention and turns His head and says, oh, okay, I think I will work with you. I think I've got something for you. I think too often we have it backwards. We think that faith is based on results. And so we sit around and say, well, God, if you'll do some amazing stuff for me, then I'll believe. Well, actually, in that definition, that's not really faith anyway. That's sight by the time you get there, right? God always calls us to walk by faith. And so here is Peter that's saying, I want to live by faith. Please, Jesus, help me do it. He took the first step, and that's when the miracle happens. And the other thing that struck me as I was reading through the story is that if you were hanging out with your family group, if you're 12 best friends, and one of them hopped out on water and started walking on water, what would you think would happen with the other 11 people in your group? What would you think might cross somebody else's mind?
I want to do that too.
I'd like to do this too. This may not happen again a whole lot of times. I've jumped in water lots of times and sunk straight to the bottom. You would think that one of those apostles would have said, Peter's doing it. You'd think Andrew, I'm not going to let my brother outshine me. You'd think somebody, John wrote books of the Bible, surely somebody. But what was interesting to me is, at least from what we can read, nobody else, their mouths dropped open, they just gawked, and they just couldn't. Wow. And as I read that and thought about that, I wondered, we really like to watch other people live by faith.
Right.
Yep.
We really get excited. We like to tell, sadly, other people's stories.
Come on.
And so, even in our church, one sister like Jaylene usually walks in. She's got like a whole row of friends sitting with her, and there's like 5 people, and I just get all fired up. Come on, go, Jaylene. You share your faith. You go, girl. That's a great story, and I don't mind sharing her story, but at some point, maybe that should be my story, too.
Right.
Maybe I should be looking for God in Jimmy Allen's life, not just cheering on Sion Wilson or Jaylene or other people that are, doing amazing things. Even when the Schaffs, I thought about, I love to tell Nick Schaff's story when he was a preteen. He started this thing for Hope Worldwide, and in the last, 5 or 6 years, whatever it is, $15,000, $20,000 is helping the poor. I love to tell Nick Schaff's story. But at some point, it might be good to say, well, what's my story of really helping the poor and needy?
Right.
Go, Nick, that's great. But what am I doing? What I've learned, it's a little scary, is we really, I love to tell, this church in Africa, they had a Bring Your Neighbor Day, and the whole country of Zimbabwe, came out to church service, and isn't that, okay, that's wonderful, but what are we going to do in Greater Hartford?
Come on.
Right.
We like too much, I think, to tell other people's stories.
Right.
And it's interesting that Peter had a story that Jesus blessed because he stepped out in faith. Did God have a power outage? Were we all just born 2,000 years too late? Are there no longer any theophanies going on in our world? And here's the reason I bring it up. I tried that. Kevin Booker is one of my best buddies, so I'm going to make fun of him a little bit, but it's all good in the end. I've told this probably to most of you, some of you, but Oh, wow. I'm just going to be honest. I love him, okay? Kevin Booker, Kevin Booker's been a part of our church how long, Kevin?
5, 6 years.
All right. Let's just go with 5 years. We'll round it off. Kevin Booker's been a part of our church for 5 years. My interaction with Kevin Booker, let's say the first 2 years, 3 years, whatever period of time, was that Kevin Booker kind of sat in the back. He was here every Sunday, but he sat in the back. As soon as it was over, boom, he was out the door. All right. In fact, this is the scary part. We're just being honest here. In fact, he's a member of our church, and my wife didn't have any. She heard his name, so she had no idea who he was. In fact, one day, in those first couple of years, I'm going a little too extreme here, but one day, I asked the other 3 elders, and 2 of the 3 elders didn't even know who Kevin Booker was, and he was sitting right there on our roll. He was, and 2 of the 3 elders didn't even know who he was. So I thought, okay, this is probably not a good thing. Let's have a little breakfast. So Kevin and I hang out down at the Dunkin' Donuts down the street, which is kind of my second office, and we, and we kind of made a little vow to each other. I consider Kevin one of my best friends today, but we made a little agreement, and my agreement was, I'm going to really go after helping you spiritually, be more tied in, growing, learning the Bible, having connections and relationships, not just kind of being a Sunday morning man, but that's what I'm going to do. And here's what you're going to do for me. You're going to teach me to have a heart for the poor and needy. Because when I asked Kevin, what's up? I see you on Sundays, but what's up? And he basically listed out to me what's up. And what's up is he's helping every poor and needy project in the whole eastern seaboard. Is probably. I would just tell you this. Of all the people, I've only known one person in my whole life that I thought they need to do less for the poor and needy. And that's Kevin Booker. He's the only one I ever thought, you're like way overbooked for the poor and needy. That doesn't come up often in my conversations. But he had these he has like 25. So here's what I said. As Kevin laid out his 25 things he's doing. I said, first of all, for your own sanity and spirituality, that needs to shrink a little. But I said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to 5 of these with you. I'm just going to follow you around. You're going to teach me more of the heart of Jesus for the poor and needy. And so I've told you some of those stories. One of them, he had this little inner-city basketball league on was it a Saturday night? So we went down there. I think I told you about that. That's where I saw the girl cat fight. They're grabbing each other's hair and flinging each other around, their hair all over the ground. And it was a pretty frightening experience. I like little guys. All wild. And then we've been to the homeless shelters to serve guys in the homeless shelters. We went down to the Boys and Girls Club, and now really our whole church is a part of doing some amazing things there. But 2 or 3 weeks ago, he took me over to Waterbury to the Jane Doe No More facility. And that's a facility where rape victims come, and they try to help them go from victims to survivors and to people who can actually, get past that and have great lives. And then what they do is they actually teach them public speaking skills. And then they send them off to the high schools and the colleges and the churches and the Rotary clubs, and they just share so that other people can come out of the crowd and get the help they need, and so that men can learn what respect on a date means with women. And so people will know if they go through some of those situations, there are some places to turn and you can speak up. I was just blown away hearing the stories at this place. It was just almost too intense to handle. And I was thinking, so I've actually only counted up 4. I guess I have to go one more place with it, which is a little scary for me, okay? But but here's what I wanted to share all that. As I have gone with him to the poor and the needy and the down and out and the oppressed, I have seen God. I have seen God in ways I've never seen him before. I think I shared this story with you, but when I went down to this inner city basketball league, he's got this guy that's volunteering his time to coach one of the teams, and so he has me sit like I'm an assistant coach or something, so I'm sitting on the bench, doing nothing but sitting there watching the game. But so this one kid, he comes out of the game, and this kid just curses out his coach. Gets in his face, spittle flying out, saying every curse word under the sun, and I'm kind of like, okay, I just saw a girl fight. I don't think I really want to see this. What in the world, And Kevin Booker walks over and grabs that kid by the back of his neck and just walks, and they walk on the other side of the gymnasium for a while. I don't know how long they were there. I don't know what was said. Then he walks him back over, and he's right in front of his coach, and he says, "Coach, I'm so sorry. That was disrespectful. I shouldn't have done that. Whatever you say goes." And I was just like, what? I saw God. I saw God. At 11:30 at night in the inner city of Hartford, in the middle of wildness, I just saw God. And I can just, to hear some of the stories and to see, and I began to think even how in the Bible, Jesus hung out with the tax collectors and the prostitutes and the sinners and the people who would scare the daylights out of us those are actually the people that Jesus loved, and He cared for, and He showed up there, and it made a difference. And I share that, certainly, you know, well, I'll say that to my conclusion, but I got to show you one other really quick point here before we get. If you take the step of faith, Jesus is going to end up in the room. Or in this case, Jesus will end up in the boat. Actually, my favorite part as I read through this story again is in Matthew 14, is verse 33, where it says, "Then those who were in the boat worshipped Jesus." You know, when you hear about worship, when do you normally think we worship? Sunday morning. Of course, we have the worship team, and we have the worship people, and of course, that's when you worship. Was this on Sunday morning?
No.
This was probably some Tuesday night, 3 a.m., Sea of Galilee. Doesn't sound like the greatest worship setting, right? But the point is when Jesus shows up, you worship. When Jesus enters a place, you bow down. You say, wow, "Oh my goodness, I just had a God sighting. And wow, wasn't it spectacular?" And that's really my desire for your life and for mine. And I, you know, this Bible stuff, this Christianity stuff, this is about God. It's not about a perfectly organized religion. If you're looking for the best band anywhere, this is not the place to be, though they were awesome. If you're looking for the coolest building with the flat screen TVs and all the amenities, it ain't here. If you're looking for God, come here, take a step out in faith, and the Bible promises you will find Him. You'll see Him almost around every corner. And so as I thought about our giving for Hope Worldwide in particular, I'll just give you the boring details first. If you want to write a check for Hope Worldwide, that's great. If you've already written one for the Greater Hartford Church of Christ, that's great too. We'll just add them all up and we'll send Hope Worldwide a check. If you want to give cash, that's fine. If you don't, you know, this is above and beyond our normal contribution. You've already heard all this. But if you give 2 pennies, it's fine. If you give $10, it's fine. If you give $100, it's fine. But here, what we're doing today is taking a step of faith. Taking a step of sacrifice for a sick person in Cambodia. For a kid in Africa who can't go to school unless they get some financial help. For a Hurricane Sandy victim that's right down the coast from us. And here we are, most of us had electricity fine through the storm, and many of them didn't have it for weeks or months and lost family members or homes. And I just got to share this, because I think one of the things I feel, and so I can get, probably you guys don't see me this way, but I can get overly sentimental. But I feel like, oh, but we just don't have that much. It's a really hard economic time, and we've kind of run out of money, and that's kind of the problem. But I was reading this past week, Isaiah 58. I won't even go there, read it later. It's actually a chapter about fasting. But it's talking about the Israelite people. Sometimes when we say Israel, we think of Israel today, which is a first world country and pretty cranking financial place, right? But in the Bible times, Israel was a third world country, and most of the time they were at the total bottom, you know, oppressed by the Babylonians or a whole host of other people, all right? And so in Isaiah 58, there's actually, when it's talking about fasting, you're talking about third world people that are dirt poor, and here's what they're thinking. Wow, you know what? If I fast, then I can take the food that I would have eaten that day and give it to somebody else and help them be fed. And I just thought, oh my goodness. I've never even come close to thinking that way. I just say, well, I don't have any God, so I can't give it. Well, you know what? Actually, if I didn't eat today, and I just took the money I was going to spend today to give to somebody else, I could do that.
Right, right.
I didn't eat today, even if it was just a little bowl of rice, and went and gave it to somebody else. What struck me as I read through Isaiah 58 is, if you want something badly enough, you'll find a way to make it happen.
That's right.
If you want to help the oppressed, the poor and needy, the down and out, the disenfranchised, you'll find a way to help. And so, whether that's with money, whether that's in action,
that's so true.
I'm so fired up. I got to share that, but I'm just so fired up that one way God shows up is on Wednesday night. God was here. Okay, He was here. Thankfully, I got to be here, but He was here. And to see Irene get baptized and Sylvester get baptized, we ended the whole thing, and Brittany over here stands up and says, "Hey, by the way, I'm getting baptized on Sunday too." And that's another whole story we'll tell you maybe next week. But wow, I got to tell you just a little piece of this now, but Bo Cummings, who many of us know and love, used to be in our church. He's actually now on staff up at Pioneer Valley. He met an assistant football coach for UMass Amherst that he studied the Bible with and baptized about a month or two ago. And then this football coach was dating Brittany, who lives in Bristol, so she's been coming here. Anyway, long story, she's going to get baptized up there this Sunday morning. But I'm just saying, I was sitting by a guy who was 2 chairs over, and he turned over and said, you know, that's me in 2 weeks. I mean, God just showed up on Wednesday night. You were sitting here, you know, God was like nudging you to become a Christian, change your life. God showed up on Wednesday night.
Yep.
And my deal is, you know what, God can show up on Thursday night, and God can show up on Sunday afternoon, and God can show up, and it might be in helping the poor, and it might be in the restaurant you go to, and it might be in the family gatherings over Thanksgiving, but God can show up. He will show up. And so I pray that even today as we give, this is kind of a first step. This is that first step of faith. God, I don't have a whole lot, but what I have I'm going to give to help other people all over the world that are down and out, just like the heart of Jesus. Let's pray.